This is the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow sliver of water between Iran and the Arabian Peninsula. Every single day, roughly 20 million barrels of oil pass through this 39-kilometer bottleneck, and the world watches every tanker with nervous eyes. You would think the real danger of closing Hormuz was about oil prices spiking, but here's what the headlines are missing. The closure has quietly taken offline 1/3 of the world's helium supply, and without helium, the AI chip industry cannot function. Helium is not some niche industrial chemical. It is the invisible gas that keeps the machines printing the world's most advanced AI chips running. So, why is one of the most powerful industries in human history entirely dependent on a gas that can only be shipped through a single Gulf waterway? And what happens to the Nvidia GPUs, the data centers, the AI race, when that waterway goes silent? To understand this, we have to start with an uncomfortable truth about the supply chain behind AI that almost nobody has connected yet. When Iran declared the Strait of Hormuz closed in late February, the first thing the world noticed was oil. Futures spiked. Energy ministers issued statements. News anchors talked about gasoline prices. And that reaction made complete sense. 20 million barrels of crude oil pass through that strait every single day, making it the most important energy choke point on the planet. But while the cameras focused on oil tankers, something else was quietly disappearing from the global market. Something smaller, lighter, and in many ways far more strategically important. Helium. Specifically, the helium produced at Ras Laffan Industrial City in Qatar, the largest single liquefied natural gas and industrial gas complex on Earth. Because almost all of Qatar's helium must transit the Strait of Hormuz to reach the world, the closure did not just threaten energy markets. It effectively switched off 1/3 of the entire global helium supply overnight. And that is a problem the AI industry is completely unprepared for. Most people think of helium as the gas that fills birthday balloons. That mental image could not be more misleading. Industrial helium, ultra-high purity helium, is one of the most technically demanding materials in modern manufacturing. It is chemically inert, meaning it will not react with anything. It has the second lowest boiling point of any element, and it is the only gas with the thermal and physical properties needed to do specific, irreplaceable jobs inside a chip fabrication plant. In a semiconductor fabrication plant, helium does 3 critical things. First, it keeps vacuum chambers clean by purging any reactive gases that would contaminate a wafer during processing. Second, it cools wafers during high-temperature etching and deposition, where even tiny temperature fluctuations can destroy a chip's precision. Third, it provides the inert atmosphere inside lithography, etch, and deposition stages, the steps where the actual circuitry gets printed onto silicon. Here is the key point. Engineers have already substituted helium out of every process where substitution was possible, because helium is expensive and always has been. What is left is the hardcore, the irreducible minimum that cannot be swapped out for anything else. So when supply drops, there is no plan B. The fab either has helium or it slows down. Now here's the interesting part. The chip industry's dependence on helium has been quietly growing for years, and the AI boom turbocharged it. Global semiconductor sales hit around $791 billion in 2025, up 25% year-on-year, driven almost entirely by demand for AI accelerators. And as chip volumes grew, helium consumption grew with them. By 2025, semiconductors had overtaken MRI scanners to become the single largest consumer of helium globally, accounting for about 21% of total demand. That is a staggering shift. Hospitals running MRI machines, one of the most helium-intensive applications ever invented, are now second place. The chip industry is number 1, and the most helium-hungry chips of all are the ones at the cutting edge. Advanced AI accelerators. Nvidia's Blackwell GPUs, Google's TPUs, and the next-generation logic chips being built at TSMC are manufactured on extreme ultraviolet lithography systems. EUV machines use helium both to cool their optics and to maintain the ultra-stable, contamination-free vacuum environments that EUV light requires. You cannot run an EUV line without a steady, uninterrupted supply of ultra-pure helium. And EUV is the only way to print the most advanced nodes. There is no workaround. Market research forecasts more than a 5-fold increase in helium demand from semiconductor manufacturing between 2025 and 2035, driven almost entirely by AI workloads and data center buildouts. The strait closure hit exactly at the moment when that demand curve was steepest. So, how exposed is the market right now? Let me give you a sense of scale. Qatar produced about 63 million cubic meters of helium in 2025, roughly 1/3 of a global market of around 190 million cubic meters. It is the world's largest helium producer after the United States. A U.S. Geological Survey report puts Qatar's recoverable helium reserves at around 10 billion cubic meters, more than the United States at 8.5 billion, more than Algeria at 8.2 billion, and more than Russia at 6.8 billion. Qatar is not just a large supplier, it is structurally dominant in a market that has almost no slack. The response in spot markets was immediate. Within about a week of the strait closure, helium spot prices doubled. Buyers scrambled to secure any available cargo. Analysts now warn that if the disruption runs 60 to 90 days, prices could jump a further 25 to 50% on top of that, potentially pushing helium above $2,000 per 1,000 cubic feet. That would be more than 4 times early 2026 price levels. For a chip fab running continuous production, that cost shock lands directly on the bottom line with no ability to pass it on quickly. And the storage situation makes everything worse. Most helium moves globally as ultra-cold liquid in specialized cryogenic ISO containers, around 11,000 gallons each, on a voyage from Qatar to Asia or Europe that takes roughly 3 weeks. But here is the killer. There are only 4 large underground helium storage caverns in the entire world, 3 in Texas and 1 in Gronau-Eppe, Germany. Most liquid helium tanks at filling stations and customer sites hold just a few days to a week of supply. The entire global system runs just in time. A multi-week maritime disruption does not just raise prices, it drains the pipeline completely. But perhaps the most surprising dimension of this crisis isn't the price shock, it's who gets hit hardest. China imports about 95% of its helium, and roughly 90% of that comes from Qatar. That means Beijing's entire AI and semiconductor ambition, the domestic chip push, the Huawei Advanced Node program, and the state-backed fab expansion, is acutely exposed to a disruption in Ras Laffan exports. For a country that has spent years trying to achieve semiconductor self-sufficiency, depending on a single Gulf producer for the gas that makes chip manufacturing possible, is a strategic vulnerability hiding in plain sight. But China isn't alone. East Asia broadly, South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and much of Europe all run import-dependent helium supply chains. TSMC in Taiwan, Samsung in South Korea, the European fabs supplying automotive and industrial chips. All of them are now competing for the same shrinking pool of available helium cargoes. In a market with almost no spare capacity and no meaningful substitutes, that competition turns into a bidding war. In a bidding war, the fabs with the deepest pockets win, and everyone else slows down. And this is incredibly dangerous because the helium shortage does not arrive into a clean, healthy AI chip market. It arrives on top of a supply chain that was already stretched to breaking point. Even before the strait closure, TSMC's CoWoS advanced packaging capacity, the packaging process required for Nvidia's Blackwell G, PU units, and virtually every high-end AI accelerator, was sold out through mid-2026. Key substrate materials like T-glass were in shortage until at least 2027. The AI chip market was already a bottleneck. Now, a helium-driven slowdown in upstream wafer fabrication adds a new constraint on top of the packaging constraint, on top of the substrate constraint. What was already a tight market has become a full supply chain sandwich, squeezed from every direction at once. For anyone trying to build a GPU farm, stand up a data center, or hit an AI hardware deployment timeline in 2026, that sandwich has real consequences. Fewer wafers processed means fewer chips yielded. Fewer chips yielded means longer lead times. Longer lead times mean delayed data centers, stretched AI infrastructure roadmaps, and higher costs passed on to every business building on top of that hardware. The collateral damage extends well beyond AI. Helium is also essential for MREI scanners, and supply tightening has already begun, disrupting MRE supply chains in markets like India, raising scan costs and threatening delays as hospitals run on thin inventories. Aerospace, optical fiber manufacturing, welding, leak detection, and airbag production all depend on helium too. A Strait of Hormuz closure simultaneously stresses both the old economy and the new, medical imaging and industrial gases on one side, electric vehicles, smartphones, and AI data centers on the other. Chemical industry experts draw a fairly clear line between two scenarios. If the conflict ends and the strait reopens within roughly 2 weeks, the market can absorb the shock. Existing inventories and the recent supply overhang provide enough buffer. But beyond a month or two, the picture changes fundamentally. Storage caverns drain. Alternative production in the US, Algeria, and Russia's Amur plant maxes out. And a fierce bidding war breaks out between chip fabs, MRI suppliers, and industrial users for every marginal container of liquid helium on the planet. At that point, it is no longer a price story. It becomes an allocation story, and allocation stories have winners and losers. Next time you see a headline about the Strait of Hormuz and oil tankers, remember, the 1/3 of global helium quietly disappearing from the market is the story that could actually reshape the AI race. What do you think? Will this finally push chip fabs to diversify their helium supply chains? Or will the industry go back to business as usual the moment the strait reopens? Like and subscribe for more.